Have you ever found yourself in a mental game without knowing what to do? Today we will talk about the isolated pawn and how to play against it, so the next time you will crush your opponent. The best way to understand how to fight against the isolated pawn is by learning from the greatest chess player ever existed. For this reason, I will tell you the general ideas, the plans, and we will check 3 games. Before starting, I will tell you the general plans. When you are playing against an isolated pawn, you want, in general, you want first blockade the square in front of the pawn with a knight or with a bishop, preferable with a knight, because the knight from that square, let's say for example that the isolated pawn is on d5. If white, in this case, can place a knight on d4, this knight will blockade the advance of the pawn and will control also these squares that are really important. So this is the first rule. So try to place a knight here. If you can't place a knight, try to control anyway that square, the square in front of the isolated pawn, because in this case black will try to push that pawn. Second rule, try to exchange minor pieces, because when you go to an endgame of heavy pieces, that isolated pawn will be really weak. And for example, let's say that just imagine that the minor pieces are all gone, and maybe also some pawns, and we have 2 rooks and 1 queen. Each side has 2 rooks and 1 queen and other pawns. So what will happen? That this pawn will be on d5, and we have 4 squares to attack this pawn. Instead, black will have to defend that pawn, but we'll have 3 squares. And even if it doesn't seem so much, it can be a decisive advantage, because having 1 more square, it means that suddenly you can shift play and go from an attack to the isolated pawn, go for an attack to the king. And the lack of space from black side, in this case from the side that has the isolated pawn, will be a decisive factor for the winning or for the loss of the game. So let's start with the game. This one is between Karpov and Spassky. Karpov is white and Spassky is black. I tell you what we will see, so you can understand better the moves while we will set the board. So at first, Karpov will create an isolated pawn in the position. The second thing that he will do is trade some pieces. In this case, the knights, to reduce the possibility of Spassky to push that pawn. Third, he will control the square in front of the pawn with a black dark square bishop. And fourth, he will gain space, and with this space advantage, he will put pressure on black position. Black pieces will be bound to defend the weakness of the pawn, and at the right moment he will win that pawn, and he will push, and with a tactic he will win. So let's start. Karpov here opened with d4. We have knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, bishop e7, bishop f4, castle, e3, and c5. So here now we have d takes c5, knight c6, queen c2, queen a5, a3 to just to go for b4 if it can happen. So bishop takes e5. Now b4 is not possible because the knight takes, and after pawn takes there is the rook under attack, but there is rook d1, and now bishop e7. First knight d2 and bishop d7, and this is an inaccuracy, because after bishop e2 and rook c8 we have castle, queen d8 and trade. So now there is an isolated pawn. Okay, and here it starts the plan. So trade some minor pieces, control the square in front of the pawn, gain activity, gain space, and then win eventually that pawn. So knight f3, h6, knight e5, e6, so offering an exchange of minor pieces. Knight takes e6. Now b takes is not possible, because after b takes there is bishop a6, and the rook is trapped because this diagonal is controlled by the bishop, so the rook can't go anywhere. And now we have rook takes c6, bishop f3, so putting pressure on the isolated pawn. Queen b6, queen b6 made to control the square in front of the pawn. Now we have bishop e5 to control the square, and knight e4. Knight e4, queen e2, trade with the bishop to not let any positional weakness in the board. And now we are controlling the square, putting pressure on d5, and life is good. So rook d8, and we have some shuffle, but as you can see, the plan of white is really easy. He wants to put pressure on the pawn. So now I will go a bit faster. Here we have some shuffle, and now the pieces are coordinated in a perfect way to put pressure on this pawn. Here we have g3. Just is the style of Karpov, just some small moves. Here, queen h5, a6, h3, okay? And now that Karpov is gaining space on the king side, and here there is a f6 just to give a bit of space from black side. Here we have queen d1 and queen b5, g4, and g5, and this is an inaccuracy. Now we can't push right now on. Well, we could push on f5, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, if black takes, he will just improve the position of white. So we have king h1 and queen c6, and now push. And the difference is that after this push on e4, black can't take because the rook is under attack. The bishop before was protecting the square. So now we gain the pawn. And after with a tactic, Karpov won the game. Here there is a rook sacrifice, and after that d6 wins a piece. And here first b3, because if he takes, if Karpov takes, the rook is under attack. So first b3, and now if the queen takes, we can we can exchange the queen. After the bishop takes, we can take the rook on e7, and if the rook takes on d3, we can promote to our new queen. And this game is won by Karpov, and Spassky resign. So let's go to the second game. The second game is between Korchnoi and Karpov. Karpov is black and will create an isolated pawn and will play against it. So what will be the strategy in this game? Again, trade some minor pieces, control the square in front of the isolated pawn, and then we will see the thing that we talk about in the introduction of this video, and we will see how much is important the space behind the pawn, because white will be forced to protect that pawn with heavy pieces, and black will have just one more square, but white pieces will be bound to the defense of that pawn, and black will shift the play to against the white king. So here we start with e6, knight c3, d5, d4, bishop e7, knight f3, knight f6, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, castle, rook c1 first, d takes c4, e3, and c5, takes, and here we have the isolated pawn. So the strategy will start in some more moves. Here we have knight c6, castle, and knight h5, so offering a trade of a minor piece. Here we have take. We want to control the square, so not queen takes, but knight takes. And now we are controlling d5 and bishop b3. So here we have knight f6, again controlling the square, and knight e5, bishop d7, queen e2, rook c8, just developing. Okay, and here white offers a trade of knight. It's not a problem. We want to trade minor pieces, so knight takes e4, queen takes, and bishop takes, and bishop c6. And here we take again, and okay, really important. What if rook takes? If rook takes, we don't take back with the knight, because if we take back with the knight, we are leaving white the possibility to push this pawn. So, for example, if rook takes and knight takes, this move is available, because after we trade, there is bishop takes, and here this endgame, well, is drawish, but white is a bit better, because has the bishop, the pawns are on both sides, so we don't want to give white this possibility. And if rook takes, the correct move is c takes, and now we are controlling even more the square. But the game didn't went like that. The game went with rook c3, and now queen d6. And again, Karpov is lining up the pieces to control, to threaten that pawn. And here we'll have the same developing plan of before, with the rooks that are targeting this pawn, and the queen. Eventually, the queen will shift behind. Here, Karpov offer a queen trade, because less pieces means more chance to attack that pawn. Here we have queen f4, knight d5, queen d2, queen b6, trade. Again, really important, not pawn takes, but rook takes. And now, let's see. Now black has 4 squares, and white has 3 squares, so a really bad spot for white pieces. Here we have rook b3 and queen c6, queen c3. We don't want to trade, because if we trade, black will take with the c pawn, and this will not be anymore an isolated pawn, but it will be an hanging pawn. Then that is another structure. I will cover also this structure. This video is the first one of a series of videos that I'm doing just to cover the most famous pawn structure in chess, how to play against, and how to with those pawn structures. So, friendly reminder: if you want to stay updated to learn this type of positional stuff, you can subscribe to my channel. But let's go. Here we have d6 and f4, b6, and rook b4, b5, a4, take, and here we have a5, and rook takes on a4. So, to win a game of chess, we need 2 weaknesses in the position. Is a common rule, because one weakness is not so much. The games can finish in a draw. But if we have 2 weaknesses, we can target the first one, and then in a second moment we can play to the second weakness. And here, let's pause a moment, and let's think about the second weakness. Well, the first one is the isolated pawn. The second one is the lack of control of the light squares and of the dark squares around white king. So we will put pressure on this pawn, and at the right moment we will shift the play. So here we have queen b5, rook d2, e5, take. If the pawn takes, we can infiltrate in black position, and this is completely losing for white. Here we have queen a1, and after queen a1 we have queen e8. Again, white cannot take, but well, he cannot take, but he takes, and this is bad, because well, now we will just enter. So queen c6, threatening mate on g2, and after check, king h7, check, g6, queen f1. We have a series of checks, and this is lost. Is lost not because we take, well, here is forced king g1 we don't take the rook on a8 because otherwise it would be a blunder, yeah, because there is queen takes f7. But after queen takes f7 is a draw because there is king h6, queen f6, and well, if the king try to escape in this position, actually we will lose the game because then the rook will be pinned. There will be a double attack. So we can't play like that, but the problem is that after this move, we don't take the rook, but we take this pawn. And here we are threatening again the rook, and we are also threatening to give a lot of checks. So this is losing for white. And let's go to the third game. Okay, and here we are at the third game that was played between Mikhail Tal and Lajos Portish. So this game maybe is the less instructive because the other two games had a clear plan. This game is well, Tal played it, so is more tactical. Is a more tactical game, but we can find also some positional consideration, and I will tell you what on what you can focus on this game. We will see the creation of an isolated pawn, and we will see black attempt to protect this pawn. And this attempt will lead in a position in which black rook will no longer have space. So black will be forced to sacrifice a quality only because black tried to defend that pawn. So let's start. Here we have 6, d4, d5, knight d2, c5, e takes, d takes, e takes, e takes, bishop b5, bishop d7, queen d2, bishop e7, and take. And here we have the isolated pawn on d5. So knight f6, knight b3, castle, and knight f3, rook e8, bishop e3, a6, and bishop d3. So bishop a4, knight f d4, knight b d7, and long castle. And well, long castle because I mean he is Tal, so he has to do long castle. Here black retakes the pawn, so the material is equal, but there is this weakness, and we will see black attempt to defend this pawn. Bishop f8 and knight takes c5. So trade some minor pieces. Bishop takes, queen f3. Bishop takes e3 and knight takes. Rook c8, bishop f5. Rook c5. And here we have rook d4 and bishop c6. So why bishop c6? Because here black was threatening to double up and to win this pawn. So the bishop has to go on c6 to cover that pawn. But now that we saw that black played in a strange way, and now the black pieces are uncoordinated, and this rook has no space. So another thing that you can think during a game is that sometimes it's not always possible to gain the isolated pawn, but there is always a balance. There is always a balance in the advantage of the position. So if it's not possible to gain that pawn, it means that sometimes, most of the times, it means that black defended that pawn properly, but to defend that pawn leave you another type of advantage, and in this case is the uncoordination of the pieces. So instead of focusing only on the isolated pawn, we can focus also on other advantage, because is the rule that I told you before, is the two weaknesses. The first weakness is the pawn on d5. The second weakness is the lack of coordination and the lack of space for the black rook. So here, before, attack the rook. Rook b5, a5, attack the rook. Rook b6, attack the rook, and after rook b5 again. We have first queen f4, and after that we win the piece. The quality. And here, now that we are up a quality, it doesn't matter anymore the pawn, the isolated pawn. We just want to trade pieces and finish in an endgame up a quality. So here I will be a bit faster. Here we have some moves, but well, after these moves, it's just a matter of technique. Here we want to trade some pieces, so here we trade, and we trade because again, it doesn't matter anymore the isolated pawn. We just want to release a bit of pressure, and we are up a quality. So if we finish in an end game, we will be better most of the times. Always check if there is something strange. But here we have a queen takes e6, f takes e6, and after some moves here. After this one, black resigned because, well, now if the bishop takes, the rook will fall. If the knight goes on e4, we can take the rook, and after bishop takes, also rook c8, and black doesn't have enough compensation to fight for a win, and even for a draw in this game, so black resigned here. So this is the end of this video. I will do also other videos, like for example how to play with an isolated pawn, but also I will cover also other structures like the hanging pawns or the advanced pawn and other stuff. So I will understand what to do in the next days. So I hope you like it. I hope you find it helpful. See you in the next video.